Last weekend, I spent 2 days at the world's largest, I guess you call it a trade show for hi-fi hardware, and there's a bit of head-fi there as well. And the show took place at the MOC in Munich, and I think it pulled in roughly 22,000 people over 4 days. And with around 500 exhibitors showing off their wares, it would be impossible for any one person to visit more than 10% of those. So I saw around 20 exhibitors in 2 days, and in this video, I will highlight 10 or so of my favorites.
This episode is brought to you by Marantz, makers of the ISA award-winning Model M1 streaming amplifier. Click the link below for more info.
Pro-Ject's booth is like a spaceship, well lit and stacked with enough gear to fill its own hi-fi show in a small Scandinavian country. And now that Pro-Ject is musical fidelity's overlord, the spaceship this year was bigger than ever before. But at the front of Pro-Ject's exhibition space was something interesting and a little bit cute, a hi-fi system that you can take on vacation. It's called the Travel Set, and it puts a pair of small two-way monitors and a tiny integrated amplifier with Bluetooth and all the cabling inside a travel case. And that travel case has an extractable handle and it moves on wheels. And this hardware setup will deliver better stereo separation than a standard Bluetooth speaker or a soundbar. And for me, this was a great way to start the show because much of the gear shown in Munich isn't what most people would call affordable. Astell&Kern makes some seriously expensive portable audio products, and I visited the Korean manufacturer's mega booth to see the PD10, which I think was announced a couple of months ago. Now that's an audio player that docks onto a USB cradle to become a balanced outputting network streamer. But then something unexpected caught my ear about the recently announced SP4000. Now that's the latest flagship DAP, and it isn't for the faint of wallet. And I own its predecessor, the SP3000, and it's emphatically the most expensive DAP I've ever used, and it's also the best sounding. But I don't use it anymore. Why not? Because AURALiC no longer works on it. And that app comes from a whitelist of installable options inside the OS. Now maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe Astell&Kern hasn't kept the app up to date. But this won't be an issue going forward with its replacement, the SP4000. So rather than giving us a short whitelist of installable apps, the SP4000 uses what they call Open Android. And I'm pretty sure this is Astell&Kern's first flagship player to use the Google Play Store for app installs. So the upshot is that we can install any streaming app of our choosing, including things like AURALiC and Plex. And then that Play Store will keep our installed apps up to date. Now what I don't know yet is if the SP4000 handles digital audio bit perfectly from all of those third-party apps. But perhaps if you know, let us know in the comment section below. Okay, a question for you. Is it pronounced WiiM or is it pronounced WiiM? I've been pondering this for a couple of months, but finally I have a definitive answer for you. It's WiiM. And I know this because I asked several members of the WiiM team at their Munich show booth. And WiiM continues its entry-level streaming stampede with 3 new products. The first of which is the WiiM Amp Ultra, which basically puts a touchscreen on the front of, I think, the WiiM Amp Pro. And then there's the Sound, which is a bit like WiiM's answer to the HomePod, but without AirPlay, but with Google Cast, Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, I think Qobuz Connect, and Roon Ready, a bit like all the other WiiM streaming products. Now there's a screen on the front of the Sound that shows cover art and a touch-sensitive control panel on the top. And then lastly, there's the Sub Pro, which I don't think I managed to get any footage of, which is dumb of me. That's a subwoofer with an analog input, so for like traditional subwoofer setups, but it's also equipped with an Ethernet connection so it can sit on your network. Now, none of these new products is shipping until I think the fall of this year or the autumn, which means pricing isn't yet known or it hasn't been made available to us. And you can read more about them on my website with the link in the show notes below. But what I didn't know until I got to the WiiM booth is that these new products can be combined to form a networked 5.1 system. So you'd have like a WiiM Amp Ultra powering the front, left and right passive speakers, and then maybe you'd have a sound or something similar as the center channel, and then a pair of sounds working the rear left and the rear right. And we'd round this out with the Sub Pro for the low end, the 0.1. Now the WiiM Home app has been coded to handle the setup and configuration of each of these playback zones over the network. So you've got one playback zone for the front and then one for the center, one each for the rears, and then one for the sub. So yeah, even the subwoofer can be configured over the network. And if I've got it right, I think I've got this right, WiiM's room correction can be run across all 5 speaker units, albeit only as the listening position, right, with your phone. That's how you measure it. Now, I plan to make a review video about this kind of setup later in the year. But lastly, because I find the speed with which WiiM adds new software features to its app pretty remarkable, I asked about the size of their software team. And they have 70 people developing their software, which I think is pretty damn huge. Now, the other big player in the entry-level streaming space is Eversolo, and they were showing off their new Play device in Munich. Yeah, it's called Play, and the P at the front is meant to be written lowercase, and that's a streaming amp with touchscreen control and single point room correction, a bit like the WiiM. And like the WiiM Amp Ultra, the Play has a subwoofer output with bass management on the back, and it also does HDMI ARC, although I'm not sure if the Play supports Dolby Digital as the WiiM does. But Eversolo's gear differs from WiiM's because its OS allows us to browse streaming music libraries from the front of the player on the touchscreen. Now that's crucial for Apple Music users who want bit-perfect playback, which AirPlay doesn't really give us, and who want gapless playback, which Google Cast definitely doesn't do. Now there will also be a second version of the Play with a CD-ROM drive built into the side, and that's for CD playback and ripping. And the Play, I think, is shipping later this month, but Eversolo were also showing off in their booth 2 other new products, so the T8 streaming transport and the Z10 DAC. Now these 2 products aren't ready yet, so what we saw in Munich were barely functional prototypes whose software was, I think, a long way from being fully functional. And once again, the price on the T8 and the Z10 will remain under wraps until they begin shipping in, I think, Q4 of this year, and you can read more about those products, again, using the links in the show notes below. Lyngdorf's room correction software is called Room Perfect, and it's more sophisticated than the room correction found in Eversolo and WiiM devices. So instead of taking one measurement at the listening position, Room Perfect insists we take half a dozen or more. And so with multiple measurements, it is better equipped to make a 3D acoustic map of the room. I think that's the idea. And another of Lyngdorf's points of difference is its use of direct digital amplification. So this is where the signal stays in the digital domain all the way through the amp circuit right until just before the speaker outputs, and there the PCM signal is converted to PWM. And then that PWM signal is used to switch the amplifier's output devices. And the advantage of that is you don't need a DAC chip in the middle. Now, Lyngdorf calls this TDAI, so True Digital Amplifier Integrated. And regular viewers of this channel will know that I've already reviewed the smaller 1120 and the bigger 3400. And in Munich, Lyngdorf was showing off a new TD-AI model called the 2210. Now, if you're wondering, as I did, what the numbers mean, the first number in the model number is the product series, and the second is the power output into 4 ohms. So the new model is a second series component offering 210 watts per channel into 4 ohms and also 105 watts per channel into 8 ohms. And it has HDMI ARC on the back, and its streaming support runs the gamut. So it gives us Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, Apple AirPlay, Google Cast, Roon Ready, and Cobas Connect. And Cobas Connect is coming to the 3400 later this week and to the 1120 later this year. Mind you, the new one, the 2210, won't be shipping until September. Now you might ask, why would you wait for the new model? Well, that's because it goes full audiophile catnip with a front panel touchscreen, which neither of the other 2 models has. Okay, let's go mega high-end on the streaming front now with AURALiC, because in its basic configuration at 15,000 euros, the IKEA X3 is a network streamer and a CD transport. But if you spec it out with a DAC, a line stage and a preamplifier and a phono stage and all that stuff, you're looking at closer to 25K. Now, I've already spoken to former CEO Shunchen Wang about the IKEA X3's finer points in the Darko.Audio podcast. I did that a couple of months ago, and I'll put a link in the comment section below for that. But I went to visit Shunchen at his Munich room this year to say goodbye, because he's stepping back from the company to do other things, and we probably won't see him again in hi-fi circles. But our short farewell chat also allowed me to joke with him that the X3's front panel, the now playing text, could be read from the moon. And I think there's some kind of visual disconnect between that now playing screen and the menus that lie beneath it. And it's my humble opinion that the fonts and the layout, yeah, I think they need some work before the X3 begins shipping. And I don't think I really know when that will happen. Staying at the pricier end of the market, I visited the Harman room, and this was early on the first day and before I'd had a chance to read the press releases about new JBL speakers and new Mark Levinson amplifiers. So JBL has 3 new Summit loudspeaker models coming down the pike. So one of them is a large 3-way floor stander, and then there's a smaller 3-way floor stander and a stand mount that comes with stands. And all 3 of these new speakers use a compression driver mounted inside a horn-loaded throat. And then from Mark Levinson, we will also be seeing new 600 series hardware, so a preamp, a stereo power amp, and some monoblocks. Now, Harman has announced pricing on the JBL speakers, but not the Mark Levinson amplifiers. And none of this will be shipping until later this year. And that was the problem with a lot of new gear showing this year at Munich High-End. It's not finished, or the pricing hasn't been set yet, or both really. It's not finished and the pricing hasn't been set. And that's true of almost everything, I think, featured in this video. So the world's largest hi-fi show has become a bit of a teaser trailer for what's coming down the line rather than the launch pad for products that are ready to buy now. So let's wrap up with 2 rooms that showed nothing new, but were in turn educational and fun. Now the first is AudioQuest's blind ABC demo, which I took outside of normal show hours, basically to ensure we had quiet in the room. Now they had 3 WiiM Ultra DACs hooked up to a Heed amplifier driving acoustic energy speakers. Now the first WiiM was running a stock power cable, a stock interconnect, so the cables you get in the box, and it was configured to stream over Wi-Fi. Now the second WiiM DAC sounded ever so slightly better than the first. I'm talking about very, very small differences. And we were later told, and I cannot emphasize enough later, told that it was running a stock power cable and a stock interconnect, but it was streaming over Ethernet, right? So that's a small upgrade that costs us absolutely nothing. Now the third WiiM DAC sounded a little bit more relaxed and a little bit richer, I guess. And we were again told after the demo that it was kitted out with an AudioQuest power cable, an AudioQuest Ethernet cable, and an AudioQuest analog interconnect. Now, whilst I would question the value of adding 400 euros worth of cables to a 400 euro DAC, this demo, to me, quite clearly showed that not all cables sound the same. But what we cannot determine from this demo is which of the cables were doing the hard work, really. I mean, was it the interconnect, was it the power cable, or was it the Ethernet cable? Or was it a combination of all three? I don't know. Lastly, Vivid Audio was showing a pair of the Kaya 90 floor standers with molar electronics. However, they weren't waxing lyrical about high-res audio or pushing the sound of vinyl from their extremely luxurious garage turntable. No, they were playing 78s. Why? Because they could. And because also they know that the show floors at the MOC are simply too noisy to pick apart the differences between source components or source material. Shows really, I don't think, they're not for listening, therefore proof of functionality. So if you're wondering what any of the other gear in this video sounded like, you're out of luck. Because blind demos aside, I don't come to hi-fi shows to listen, because 90% of the rooms are too noisy once the show is up and running for the day. And even in the quieter spaces, we still have to listen through the room, through the music, through the speakers, and through the amplifier to isolate the sound quality of a single source component. So anyone who says, oh, I heard that DAC in Munich, without it being part of an A/B demo, is engaging, I think, in some seriously heavy wishful thinking. And A/B demos are as rare as rocking horse shit at hi-fi shows. The most we can hope for at any hi-fi show really is to get a taste of what a pair of loudspeakers might sound like. And this is why you'll hear many people say that they come to Munich more for the other people than the listening. And if I ruled the world, hi-fi shows would be A/B demos or passive displays like 99% of the exhibitor spaces found downstairs at the MOC. But what do I know? I don't run hi-fi shows for a living. Anyway, that's all from me for today. Like and subscribe according to your preference and hit us up on Patreon if you want access to playlists for every video we've made since I think 2021. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. And I think this is Astell&Kern's first flagship. And I'm pretty sure this is Astell&Kern's first flagship player to use the Go at their booth at the now the WiiM amp. Now the other big player in the Entral 2212. Now another of Lyngdorf's points of difference is its use of direct digital amplification. So this is where the signal stays in the digital domain all the way through the amp just before the speaker outputs. It is now it has HDMI and its streaming support runs the gamut. So we get Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, Apple AirPlay, Google Cast, Roon Ready, and of course Cobas Connect, which also was. Now in Munich, I spoke with former CEO Shunchen Wang about the IKEA's. And in Munich, I spoke with former CEO Shunchen Wang about the IKEA X3's finer point. No. Now I think there's also a visual disconnect between that now playing. And I think there's also, and it's my very humble opinion that the fun, and it's my very, now also, and all of those.